So I saw Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Your Mad Mom, and I found it pretty enjoyable, yet very, very flawed at some points. So instead of just doing a recent watches thingy, I'm just gonna make this a full spoiler review, so click to the end of the video or whatever, because I'll be spoiling most of the plot. I think it's safe to say that I did like this better than the first one, but by a very, very slight margin, mainly because I just like the character of Doctor Strange, and he's my favorite character in these movies. As for the presentation, it was surprisingly better than I expected. Now, for those who are still living under a rock, this was directed by Sam Raimi, who directed the Spider-Man trilogy, and this is his first Marvel film in like 7 years, so I'll give him credit for being able to make something a little interesting with some cool presentation choices. It's a well-directed film that has a lot of creative camera work, great stylistic and directional choices that really gave this film more personality than I expected. The horror element of this film is a little tame. Actually, no, let me take that back. It's a lot tame, but still, Raimi manages to implement the element of horror in some scenarios in the right context that I found to be pretty appropriate in the film, but still, that's not saying much, like, at all. The action scenes are pretty decently done. Nothing really unique or special at times. It's just a lot of CGI, which is the problem. There is one fight scene that did involve music notes that I found to be pretty creative. I'm not exactly sure why it was there story-wise, but if it went on for another 5 minutes, I wouldn't have had a problem with it because I was still enjoying it. When you incorporate magic into your movie, you're pretty much having to be as creative as possible with your action scenes that'll help raise the certain degree of stakes or tension for the protagonist. Now, there are people that criticize this movie because it doesn't go entirely far enough, just because it was directed by Sam Raimi, just because he directed the Evil Dead films and he planned on implementing horror into this film anyway. Well, you gotta understand that this is still a Disney Marvel movie, and there's no way that the studio was going to give him that much freedom. So I already figured that this was going to be the case, that when I saw the trailer, his name was just being slapped on there for marketing reasons. I mean, giving him more freedom would have been great, but the script that was written for this movie is balanced by typical Marvel studio quota crap, while also balanced by typical Hollywood 3-act structure in the 2010s era of movie making. So if you guys heighten your standards because Raimi was directing this movie, then you forgot what kind of studio that he was working for. Sorry. My only biggest problem with Raimi implementing horror aspects into this movie was that some choices just feel more like references to his original films rather than him creating new ideas that I know that he's more than capable of. I can get over the fact that we're not going into more universes than what was teased, because remember, this is a Disney Marvel script, and I do still appreciate him adding those horror touches in the film, but it obviously does feel like the film is being weighed down by Marvel elements. And I also just learned that 40 minutes of this movie was cut, so hopefully we get an extended version, but the overall horror aspect is definitely the film's biggest strength and weakness. The performances were all pretty solid. Benedict Cumberbatch was pretty much born to play Doctor Strange, and he does seem more comfortable in the role than he was in the first film, and his character was surprisingly given a little more depth. But it's Elizabeth Olsen who probably gives the best performance in this movie by far, and probably one of my favorite performances from her in a long time. This woman can truly act, and you can tell that she's passionate about the character. Alright, now let me get into the plot, because this is where I feel like I had to drop my rating down from a 3.5 to just a 3. I mean, the plot overall is, I guess, decent for the most part. I like that Wanda is in the role of the antagonist, because it does give her moments of character development, but the confusing aspects of this film just comes from her motivations. So she wants to find her children from multiple realities, but her children died in the WandaVision series that I never watched. But mind you, she didn't even think about returning freaking Vision, you know, the man she truly loved, that she also mentioned in the same movie where she wants to go back to her kids. So what would make her think that he's not alive in multiple realities? Or how does she not know that Vision isn't alive with her kids? If she can dream hop through realities, then why isn't she certain Vision is with her kids? If Wanda is creating realities, then she would have probably created a reality where Vision is alive, right? In the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a better movie, there are infinite possibilities, which means that if a person dies or is killed in their original world, that doesn't rule out that that same person does not exist in another, unless maybe she's creating universes where the possibility of Vision doesn't exist, but that would mean that she doesn't give two flying about Vision at all, right? I mean, are we seriously going by Bioshock Infinite logic here? I would have liked her motivations more if she didn't exclude the one person that she cared about. I did like the scene where he encounters some other alternate versions of comic book characters, but I don't get why there are alternate Captain Americas and Captain Marvels, but Professor X and Reed Richards aren't alternate versions. Not very consistent. And if they're supposedly alternate versions of original characters, then wouldn't Xavier and Richards have different roles, like, you know, Rachel McAdams' character? I mean, I loved seeing them, and I'm pretty sure everyone else did, but it kind of didn't make sense to me. But what's also kind of freaking ridiculous is the fact that Wanda's dream clone attacks the Illuminati, and they make Mortal the one to stay and guard Strange instead of like maybe Reed or something, since he's probably the least powerful person there. Mortal is clearly on the same tier level as Strange to an extent, so why not just bring Strange with you? He's not the same threat as the version you killed because he doesn't even know where the Darkhold is. So not only is imprisoning him pointless, but he and Mortal are probably more matched up with Wanda than Reed and Charles combined. I mean, honestly, I love Charles Xavier, but his psychic abilities can only take him so far. And speaking of Xavier, I'm not actually sure what he was trying to accomplish entering the mind of a controlled copy of the original Wanda. I know the script needed him dead or whatever, but did he actually expect to tackle the issue of pretty much someone who had no control over their own consciousness since it was controlled by primary versions of themselves? Or was this strictly just to buy the main character's time? If he was distracting them, then he probably should have just decided to be a diversion rather than trying to tackle their psychological problem. This version of Wanda is already content with what she has, but it's the evil Wanda that wants it, so that the writers forget that they established that stake. I guess you could say that's not the real Wanda and Xavier wasn't aware, but didn't Strange tell them this? See, I don't remember that part, so somebody just put it in the comments. And I also love how Reed, you know, the smartest person ever, an absolute genius, just reaches for Wanda like he has some sort of plan in mind and dies right on the freaking spot. I mean, he had no extra security precautions, any sort of manned weapons, or any tools to keep Wanda from just simply breaking in the building, because those crappy Ultron robots just suck. No freaking fortification whatsoever, eh, Mr. Genius? And I asked myself questions on top of questions about what he was planning. Like, did he have any sort of backup, or did he really think just reaching for an incredibly powerful being with his rubber arm was going to pay off? Like, what was he thinking? And I do find it a little contrived that they have their Strange killed instead of just imprisoning that version. And I say this because they weren't really certain that Wanda was coming, but they said they were getting ready for her, so they're aware of her. So they kill their only sorcerer that clearly is a match for her, but then they plan on wanting to kill Strange. I mean, that means that they already think that he's equally a threat, but why? I mean, it's a completely different version. What did they expect Strange to actually do? He doesn't even know where the Darkhold is. So they imprison him instead of having him help fight Wanda, and then they get themselves killed for literally no reason. Like, are they stupid? Well, either way, I really did like the scene where they reincorporated the opening scene, which, speaking of that, the opening scene was actually pretty awesome. It jumps right into the action. Oh, and how the film kind of circles around to the end was pretty satisfying. But I wish the little girl character had a little more to do than just being chased or needing to be saved. I can understand what the movie was trying to do with their character, but I'm assuming that they were going to do more with her in the third movie maybe. I think that's what they're setting up. I think because she loses her parents and her and Strange discuss that there's a possibility that they're alive, you know, like Vision, but the movie never really addresses this again, and you forget that the girl even has parents. I mean, it would have been a decent parallel between her and Wanda if she also wanted to look for her parents and made sacrifices, but I don't think the writers remember that. But Wanda's character arc, excluding her implausible disregard for Vision, was a pretty satisfying one, even though we all know she ain't gonna die for long. I mean, I've been wrong before. This is a Marvel series and she's gonna come back at some point. Now, I've gotten some responses that this and Everything Everywhere All at Once are two completely different movies. Yeah, you're right. Aside from Everything being an objectively better movie, they're both dealing with the multiverse, obviously. And yeah, I'm gonna say it because I give no f***s, but EEAAO is a better film by far if you haven't already seen the thumbnail. It's a film that is both creatively free but still substantially grounded and emotionally grounded. The rules are very clear and simple because the sole reason that the possibilities established in the rules of its concept allowed the Daniels to successfully tell their story perfectly. It's a lot more creatively liberated. The story is far less convoluted and more emotionally involving, and it doesn't feel constrained by a studio mandate. I mean, once again, I still accept this movie for what it was and for what was limited to Raimi, but that's the problem. Raimi is a far better filmmaker than this. This was just a fraction of what he could have done if he was given more creative freedom. And this is the same situation with Taika Waititi with Thor Ragnarok. The makings of a distinguished filmmaker is there, but the studio doesn't even see that. And what's sad is that movies like EEAAO won't be seen by mainstream moviegoers because brand recognition, drooling over your favorite action figures, is far more easy to digest and is easily marketable than a film that actually blends art and entertainment with intelligent succession. That explains why they cast Scarlett Johansson in the role of a Japanese protagonist instead of a Japanese woman who clearly fits the role of the original protagonist who was Japanese. And not because it was a proper creative choice, it was because she was in the Avengers and people will see see a movie with sleazy whitewashed priorities simply because they recognize the freaking Marvel character. I mean, luckily that's been corrected, and if the movie was made now, I think they would have made the right choice, but still, this is a sad state of filmmaking, holding directors back from their true potential and making sure everyone pays a ticket to another superhero movie. But despite my criticisms overall, I still liked it. I just took it for what it was, because I'd be lying if I said I wasn't entertained. Seeing this in the theater was a good experience too, I'm not gonna lie. The film has some pretty creative sequences like I said before, and overall competent action and special effects. But please let the filmmaker make the movie he wants, for God's sakes. I can only say that I and everyone else who saw this movie know that Raimi might not be back, but I'm hoping he does return and the studio actually trusts him just a little bit more. But regardless, I'm gonna have to sadly drop my rating from a 3.5 to just a solid 3. It's a watchable movie overall. The skies were the limit, but unfortunately this movie was limited by Disney Marvel studio crap. Alright peeps, peace.